I've collected 3 of my professional game dev friends to participate together in a game jam. Combined, we all have around 2 decades of professional experience in various skills. Some of us even worked on a small indie game called Cyberpunk. Yeah, that's me! However, game jams are made to learn new skills and test ideas, which might be a little bit contrary for us. And we wouldn't want to cheat like that, would we? The theme of the game has been announced as it's spreading. Later that day we hopped on a call and brainstormed a bunch of ideas, but we didn't really come up with anything specific yet. Day 1 came and we didn't do anything. On day 2 we started to do some prototypes. We had an idea of maybe some corruption spreading in the world, or maybe some void consuming the map whilst you play. I focused on visual prototypes and Doan went on to implement the spreading mechanic. Day 3 came and went, and so did 4, 5 and 6, and unfortunately we didn't do anything during those days. Hold up, didn't you say that you're going to make this game in 1 week? Yeah, the week is already over. Let me explain. Game jams are time-limited events forcing you to develop an entire game with some restrictions and themes. As we already know, the theme is it's spreading, and a second limiting factor being 2 weeks timer, and it's going fast. Due to various factors, none of us had time to work on it until the second week. So with the exception of some first prototypes, we had to postpone the entire thing to its second week. Starting from now, we made a game in 1 week. For the entire duration of the jam, my job is tech art. I'm pretty novice in all of this stuff, so if you want to learn more, shout out to Ace Rolla. We settled on an idea of player being stuck in the building on fire, and so I spent the bulk of the day working on Niagara particle system, a great system for making particles in your game. After I became a master of particle system and definitely didn't tank our performance in the process, Jesus fucking Christ, Doan finished working on a spreading mechanic, and it was time for me to sample it in a transform agnostic way, meaning that it will always be at the same location no matter the object's rotation or position. Or in short, I have to make this red thingy always fit inside this green thingy. Once I was done, it wasn't perfect, but I really wanted to work on some materials for the ground, so I did just that. At the end of the day, I was really happy with our progress and went to sleep. Today Doan is going to work on a water mechanic, which is going to allow us to extinguish fire. Marcin is in the process of level design, and Magda is figuring out Blender to create our player model. I for once was working on the floor material, as well as some flames on the walls. Might have accidentally opened a portal to hell. Then I jumped back into the issue of fitting the red thingy inside the green thingy, and this time I had to fit the white thingy inside the green thingy. Once I was done with the floors, I had to figure out the same thing for the walls, but fortunately I could reuse most of this and it was really simple this time. Almost. Thanks to that I could really focus on making the material for the burning walls, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. Before the end of the day came, I had this idea of using the volumetric fog to simulate the smoke in the areas where the fire has already spread. It wasn't hard to implement, and it really gave a lot of depth to the shits on fire effect. Updates from other team members included LD for the first 2 levels, as well as spreading information about current hazard, the wetness mask, and scorched ground. Time to get some sleep. Today Marcin is going to finish LD for the 3rd level. Doan came up with this cool idea of surrounding entire levels with a black unlit material, giving all of our levels this claustrophobic look. Also today we are finally adding a player character that you can move with. Yeah, I know, gameplay and prototyping first is really important, right? And you definitely should do that first, right? And you definitely shouldn't add the core mechanic on the 9th day. Right, better late than never. After that we placed all of our LEDs into separate levels, implemented some simple progression system, added the debug key to switch to next level, made a simple transition effect, and made the first draft of the main menu. At the end of this day we can actually start, progress through, and finish the game. Mind you, it's all through the debug for now, but that's a start. Time to sleep. Following the trend of implementing progression, we made the health system as well as near-death vignette on the screen. And we finally had our first working fire extinguisher in the game. It was extremely powerful at the start, but really fun to play with. Looking at the fire backing off due to your efforts, so good. I've also made materials use the wet mask to actually look wet, although I wasn't ever happy with how it turned out. To finish the day off, I've worked on the scorched effect for the walls, making them very dark if you extinguish them after being burned. One little detail I'm really proud of are those flame marks on the walls if you extinguish them before the fire fully spreads. We've all made amazing progress already, and nothing could go wrong now. A lot of you might have heard about the massive layoffs in the gaming industry in the recent months. And most of them are real surprises. One day you might think you have the coziest job on the planet, and the next day you're out on your own. As we are all deep into this stuff, this has already happened to a lot of our friends. It's a very depressing thought that it can happen to any of us when we least expect it. And it's very easy to just explode in anger and blame everyone for this. And unfortunately, it just so happened to one of our team members, Marcin. In this case, it was an unforeseen consequence of the Embracer Group failing in some investments, causing multiple publishers to immediately cut their losses with various studios, which in turn makes multiple developers unable to compensate their employees. Similarly, this has also happened to Magda a few months ago, when the game we worked on released and turned out with mixed reviews. The studio had to cut off half of the workforce to stay afloat. It was a very depressing day for all of us and it definitely hurt our morale. But please, keep in mind, in both of their cases it was caused by the studio not being able to pay them, and not reorganization like in some other cases. If you wonder, they're both doing fine right now, so thank you for any concern. But let's get back to the topic at hand. I started this day by improving how fire looks like on the floor, and I'm much happier with the result. Then I switched to work on some water particles, and came up with an idea to turn them into a foamy looking mass. Easier said than done, and it took me quite a bit of time. However, they turned out pretty okay. We've also prepared water grenades that explode after some time, and some UI indicators for the player to see their resources. It seems though that we are able to shoot our weapons through the walls, so I asked Doan for the fix and he... Oh. Well, it doesn't really matter. Today on the agenda, we want the player to be visible through walls. We decided to make this big circle around the player, turning the walls transparent when necessary. It was incredibly annoying to set up properly. In the end, all of the issues were caused by resolution scaling, which was extremely frustrating due to how it's handled in blueprints and materials by having no access in them whatsoever. Oh, we've also prepared the exit doors at some point. However, I don't really remember when it happened. We've also added some lights to the first level for now. A bit later we've also tested the character model for the first time and look at him go! But there were some weird scaling issues, so he's going to make his grand return a bit later. Doan is focusing on gameplay balancing right now and Marcin is implementing some visual clutter for the levels. We ended the day by creating the list of the to-do tasks that we want to finish before time's up, and then we went to sleep. The Friday deadline is coming fast, and we are still way off having an actual game. For now it's just a technological mess with gameplay crumbs here and there. It was getting a bit scary for me if we can finish the game on time. So I might have gaslighted the team that today is the deadline. Throughout today, Marcin focused on improving level design, as well as spreading some props and lights on the levels. Doan placed the fire extinguishers as well as water bombs on the levels to aid the player with progression through the game. Magda worked on the animations for the player model. And I realized that we have absolutely no sounds in the game. Oh fuck me. I've browsed the web for free SFX sounds that I could remaster and recombine into various sound effects. For now, I've added footsteps and extinguisher noises. After that, I've also added an option to restart the current level. Today we've managed to make a lot of progress, even with the cost of everyone being a bit annoyed at me for lying to them about the end date of the jump. Fortunately, we still have the last day to finish everything off. Yesterday we also updated our to-do list with everything we have to do as well as what we want to do. Marcin prepared us 3D models for fire extinguisher and water grenades. He also tweaked the environment to look a bit more used and to be a little bit more out of the player's way. Doan focused on balancing the health and regeneration as well as filling the levels with last pickables the player is going to need. Magda focused on finishing character and its animation, but first she prepared a first draft of our GDD. Let me explain. A game design document is a statement of what your game is supposed to be. You are using it to describe the direction of the project, artistic approach, gameplay, and your assumptions. Often it also includes target audiences, platforms, and plans for the future development. By definition, this is something that you build before you start working on your project, but we really didn't know what we were working on until we were almost finished. So you are probably asking, why do you even bother? Well, because that's one of the rules. And to be honest, it's a good practice. That aside, Doan spent the rest of the day building up the GDD to be as good as possible. I had other issues on my mind, like our fire doesn't make any sounds, and there is really no easy way to handle this. Every sound in the game needs the source being a single position. Fire extinguisher and footsteps are really easy in that regard. You could just take their position and you're done. On the other hand, the fire is just a massless blob. It can be on your left, on your right, nowhere or everywhere. I've come up with an idea of scattering the points around the player. They don't really care about your rotation, only your position. Then they constantly check if there is fire underneath them. If there is, how intense it is. Then they can blend based on the distance as well as the value of their nearest neighbors. It's necessary as they can be inside the walls, and inside the walls there is no fire. I'm pretty proud with how it turned out. If you're on headphones, please hear for yourself. After that, I've also added an explosion sound for the grenades. And then asked Magda to playtest the game for us. And it truly seems way too easy, just a walk in the park, and extremely annoying to navigate. All of the objects are way too dark when on fire. So we've tried recoloring the flames on the objects, but in the end we just intensified the flames on the furniture, making them stand out enough to be recognizable. I've also added a sizzling sound when the fire is getting extinguished, and a death scream when the player dies. This is so fucking stupid. I love it. I've then cooked the game for my brother and his fiancée to playtest it for us. And even though they liked it, it was way too easy for them. It also seems that we don't have this transparent circle in the cooked game. And trust me, it was a nightmare to figure out why. In the end, we are just forcing everyone to use resolution scaling. Then, as soon as Magda was done with the player model, we implemented it in the game. And there is a small issue with scaling. But not to worry, we added proper idle animation and everything is fine. With help from our friend Damian, we picked out some free music for the game. And as it really looked a bit like Backrooms, we decided to go with something sounding liminal. We've also rebalanced all of the levels by removing half of the pickables for the player. After everything was said and done, it was off to the last round of playtesting. I've asked 3 other friends to check out the game for me, and this time it seemed a lot more balanced. All of them disliked level 2, as it was very hard to navigate it and all of the rooms looked the same once on fire. They were constantly backtracking and getting lost. However, there is nothing we can do about it right now, and I'm glad they liked it at least a little bit. GDD was done, the game was cooked, each IO page has been prepared, and thus the game has been published under the title "This is Fine." So, did we cheat? Did 20 years of professional experience gave us an unfair advantage? Well, not really. You remember how I mentioned that jams are about learning new stuff, right? Doan is an engine programmer, and his main focus during the jam was gameplay. Marcin is a QA, and yet he was our level designer as well as 3D modeler for the jam. Magda is also a QA, and yet she made her first ever character, rigging and animations for this jam. As for me, I'm an UI programmer, not a tech artist. I never did any particles, never did any sound effects. Touching Niagara as well as meta sounds was a very new experience for me, and none of us has any production or directing experience. Of course, all of us know Unreal Engine, at least a little bit. But we all tried something new, and I'm really proud of everything that we learned. That said, do I think our game is going to win? Hell no. It's not even going to get on the podium if I'm being honest. Some of the jam entries are really incredibly engaging and have very interesting twists and approaches to the theme of the jam. But I had a blast. I've also had a lot of fun working on this video, so check it out. Last thanks to everyone who playtested the game for us. And thanks to the Pirate Software for organizing this jam. Thanks for watching. See ya.